Well, I've been ironing and washing clothes and washing sheets all day and picking plums. My plum tree has given forth its fruit and it's sweet. It's been a beautiful day here in Albion and the weather cools in the evening and it can be quite chilly in the morning. Lately it's just been interesting weather. Very nice, really. Hot in the afternoon, but it's around about 5 o'clock it becomes bearable and you can walk out. There's a bit of a breeze. It's been like that for several days now. It's very pleasant. I think the function of the social media, this is what I get from it. It's they're bringing it in. It's more kind of entertainment, I think. And that's how I use it also, largely as entertainment. And I end up switching on something, and just when the little telephone is talking and the video is playing, or the computer screen likewise, I watch Neighbours, and their ways of not thinking, their ways of interrupting the endless self-dialogue, internal dialogue. My mind's always probing different matters. And when I get onto one of those repeated videos or funny videos or something, and then they just go on and on, then it interrupts my internal thinking. It switches it off. And I wonder whether that's the intention of entertainment. Maybe you could call it tame meant. Tame as in to make ineffectual and domesticated. You are tamed. I know it's not written like that, but it sounds a bit like that. And that's kind of what it does. Enter the tame mind. Entertainment. You could describe it that way. I'm stretching a point, but that really is what it does. Because the mind is our greatest weapon, if you like. Satan cannot stand before an upright man who is standing in the blood of Christ and has his wits about him. And what can we do? Well, our mind can probe the world, and Satan simply cannot stand. That's why he's invented entertain mind. Anything to stop us from thinking, because it's our thought process. And when our mind is open to the Word of God, then Jesus Christ, of course, can and will work through us. And Satan shrinks, simply cannot stand. It doesn't matter how many tanks and horses and secret services and piles of gold. He simply cannot stand before a man of knowledge standing in the Word of God. a priest in the order of Melchizedek. We have authority even, I don't know, perhaps authority, but we repel the forces of darkness in that manner. With the full armour of God, you could say, refer to the New Testament, wherever that is. I forget now, in Ephesians, I think, perhaps. I became interested earlier today in the matter of Pakistan. Pakistan seems to be a bit of a problem because some of the most criticised people seem to be from Pakistan. And it's a sort of a rogue state, a lawless state, apparently. I don't know. And somebody had written online that it was an anagram. I didn't really understand it, so I fed it into an anagram finder. And the only thing that I could find that looked vaguely interesting was Cain spat, I think it is. Cain spelt with a K, or Cain spits, I forget which one. But I thought that might be kind of appropriate. That it is almost as though our enemy is spitting in our face. And Cain, of course, was an enemy, was accursed. Now, Cain is spelt with a C rather than a K, but in the Bible there are a couple of places where K's become C's in the Authorized Version. And one of those places concerns the brook Kidron. Kishon is it that I was speaking of earlier, which is written with a C in the New Testament. And also Melchizedek, which generally ends with a K, but again in the New Testament in one point, I think in Hebrews, it is written with a C. So it's allowable to switch C's and K's. K's have a spiritual significance all of their own. Lord knows how much of all this stuff is relevant, but I'm interested in all those sorts of things. The letter K. So that could be, maybe this is a rogue people sent against us. But we have nothing to fear when we stand in the full armour, I guess. I sometimes watch those videos of people that live in Thailand. I started watching a channel called Thai Talks with Dan many years ago now. And I stopped watching it after a while, but occasionally I'll go back and just see what's going on, watch a single video. He's somebody who's decided to make his money at being a video person, or a certain amount of his money. They're interesting, those ideas. I'm interested in people that kind of uproot and see how they get on. It's kind of curious. And there was a pretty successful guy who'd been living in Thailand for about 40 years, I think. He was 65. And he ran a different channel, not the Thai Talks one, running a dive centre on one of the islands. A very kind of intrepid guy, maybe slightly hippie, but skilled in making money. You have to have your wits about you living, well, wherever you live. But he seemed to have done rather well. And he was ex-military. And the interviewer asked him whether he'd found that his military background had been helpful to him. And he explained that it was absolutely essential because he was going wrong as a youth. So the army had straightened him out. And he said, he'd been stealing cars and breaking in and all this sort of stuff. And getting into the army had got him onto the straight and narrow. That was the implication. And it got me wondering how many recruits to the army, young recruits, come from a troubled past like that. And is it true that the army straightens them out, or does it just continue on the same path to some extent, make use of their weakness? Are they encouraged? They're going to meet other people of the same type. Really, he was a young criminal and he should have been punished for it, let alone being put in the army. But then, the army is involved in so much deception as well. There are obviously going to be righteous men in the army, but there's going to be some wrong uns as well. And wrong uns quite often rise into positions of authority. Uriah the Hittite was a righteous soldier, and look where that got him, even with such a great king on the throne as David. Poor fellow, really. I feel angry when I think of Uriah's end. The way that he was repaid for his great loyalty. But Joab was more of a wrong gun, wasn't he? Joab, the captain of David's army at some point. I think his name was Joab. And the army is the sword of the state at the moment, really, but it should be the sword of the Lord. I love all things martial, and my love for those things, my love for Scotland. When I was a very young lad, we used to march as a scout, or a cub, I suppose, maybe only when I became a scout. I had the opportunity to hold a flag and join ranks on the streets of Liverpool, and we'd march through the streets, and I loved it so much. And there would be many of us from different parts of Liverpool and different levels of scouts, and there was the Sea Scouts. I don't know whether we even had the guides, whether there were any girls in it or not, but it was mainly men or young boys. And we had the drums and we had the trumpets. We didn't have the pipes. And people would line the streets as we marched past. Oh, I felt so proud. I loved it. Those things were frowned upon at some point. We were told that we were, to behave like that was almost being like a fascist or something. The fascists in Italy indeed used to hold similar parades and marches in the centre of towns. My mother-in-law was involved in that. She was in the Young Fascists, as were many young people. And they engaged in those sorts of spectacles and displays. And if I see, my love for those sorts of military festivals and stuff is just it's just the same. If I hear the pipes and drums, I'm very quick to tears. They're just so bold and magnificent. But nowadays, when I see them playing and marching, I always remember, who is your king? And I'm not really happy at all with how they're being used and who's paying for them, and the spiritual principles that are used somehow, that are the deceitfulness of it all. And they just make it into a spectacle for the tourists or a spectacle for the television, and none of the truth in those bold insignia that they carry and the weapons that they carry. There's no truth in them. They've been defiled, they've been downgraded into so many actors and musicians. But I wonder whether in Scotland we could possibly have a proper marching band with the drums and the pipes and the different clans, because the clans in Scotland were not really in the Highlands of Scotland. They had, what interest have ye in an English king, in that particular English king? Leave him to his just deserts. And can ye not march for the Lord in your regalia, with your pipes and drums and your clans? That would be a magnificent sight. Oh, magnificent. I'm sure it could be arranged to do something of that nature. That'd put the wind up them down in Westminster, wouldn't it? God bless them.